You all read the title. I built the SKELD from Among Us in Fallout 4. That's right, your hero in disguise has decided to kick off a brand new series for this channel. Instead of doing roleplay builds for characters, we'll be doing buildings and places based on other universes, other shows, games, movies, and books. As you all know, I'm not a PC gamer, I am a console player. So for me to enjoy creating as much as I do, I felt Fallout 4 was the best way to go in order for me to kick off this kind of series. It's got mods, it's got lots of assets, and it's got plenty of locations for us to rebuild and recreate in tons of ways. The SKELD map is a decent size for a build in Fallout 4, and I went over every single room, hallway, and vent and object in painstaking detail. The build was accomplished using mods, tons and tons of reference pictures for vents and tasks, and it also took quite a bit of imagination. I didn't actually record the building process, as when I started this out, I really wanted to see how far I could get before I wanted to commit to it, and by the time I committed to it, I was done. So for my future videos, I will have the build process, but I'll provide a tour via comparison shots. I will give you guys a breakdown of how I recreated the execution of each task, how I recreated the sabotages, and how I got the vents to work. Without further ado, let's kick off the build. We'll begin this tour where I began the build in the cafeteria. It is the largest room on the map aside from storage, and I thought it would give me a good focal point for how to gauge the spaces between all the other areas. Now that all the comparison shots of the map are complete, I'm going to show you guys a breakdown of how I created each task in the SKELD and how I recreated the execution of each task in the SKELD. This is, of course, all contingent upon the game's allowance. Some items I chose execution over appearance. Some items I absolutely wanted to have an animation, so I had to sacrifice a few things, but I think it all works out in the end. I do want to quickly preface this by saying I know there are some tasks, such as download, divert power, and fueling the upper and lower engines, that repeat constantly in separate rooms, but I'm only going to show you one instance of each task because I doubt you want to see me doing these tasks over and over again. Our first task will be the download task in Cafeteria. This is a PA system from the Institute, and the asset was from the SOE mod pack, and it's in the Decorations tab. Now, what I wanted to do was find the pen and paper animation for the NPCs, but obviously we know how building and NPCs in Fallout are, so that very quickly became undoable. So it's very simple. You just sit there and wait for the files to transfer. Up next, we have the first half of the trash task in the cafeteria, and what you do is you go up to the trash chute and you pull down the lever and the trash goes down the chute. Now, what I had to do was take a powered door, flip it on the horizontal axis, and then lay it down and attach it to a power switch. And as you can see, you flip the switch and the trash goes out. And I have to say, I'm really proud of how it turned out. I wouldn't have been able to turn it on its axis without the use of the mod Copy Pasta, and I wouldn't have been able to resize a lot of the things that I needed to resize without the Place Anywhere mod. Our last task in Cafeteria is the first part of wiring. So what you do is you match the wires with the corresponding color on the opposite side from left to right, and this one was a bit tricky for me because I had to resort to using settlement mode to reenact the way this task is completed. I couldn't find another way to execute it. I couldn't find a substitute with an animation. I found a welding animation substitute, but I couldn't get it small enough to clip it through the walls at an angle where my character wasn't floating through the ceiling or through the floor. So I just decided to flip a picture backwards, put some conduits on it, shrink them down. I could only get about 3 on there instead of 4, but I got those on there, and then I just enter settlement mode and attach the wires. For our next set of tasks, we'll be heading into Medbay, and I'm actually going to start with the scan task as it is a visual task, so I decided to have visual tasks on for my build, so I thought it was really cool how I could use this beam from Far Harbor and flip the rotation of it so that it's pointing upward, and then stand into it and essentially look like I am doing my medical scan. Right next to the scan task is the inspect sample task, and you go in and you run a bunch of samples, and then the machine does all the work while you take a break. And I got this food synthesizer. It's an Institute asset from SOE. I believe it's from SOE. And I got a scanner that you can actually interact with, and I kind of glitched it into the food synthesizer, and that way created a decent replication of the scanner. And I actually thought about the whole break process because I went in the cafeteria, and right by the download task are these 2 little doors that are closed, and if you open them you can actually see there's a little coffee station for you to grab a coffee, and in the next room there are actually some dishes and some food piled up, so you could pretend you were actually going to get a snack while the task completes itself, or you can go do another task. The next task is the asteroids task in weapons. We all know how asteroids works. You sit in the chair, you fire up your guns, and you shoot about 20 asteroids to complete the task. I have to say this was one of my favorite ones to try to recreate because I actually went back and forth about how I could replicate this task. There were 2 ways that I thought of. I didn't end up definitively settling for which one to do, but I will show both of them to you. In the first option, you sit in the chair, and where the 2 paintball guns are, you just flip the 2 power switches on each one, and the paintball machine simply shoots paint at the floating screen, and this is enough to simulate the task. Now with the other one, if you remember in the game, there's a holotape that you can insert into your Pip-Boy or into a computer called Atomic Command. And this one speaks for itself, guys. Just watch it. Did my performance suck in this demonstration? Absolutely. Would I have gotten everyone on the ship killed if this was one of those tasks? O2 is a pretty simple room. The only main tasks are to clean out the filter and pull the lever to empty the chute. There is an oxygen sabotage fix in there, but we'll get back to that later. Cleaning the filter out was another one of those tasks that required a bit of imagination. I actually ended up putting a refrigerator on its side and then just filling it with junk and then recording me taking the junk out of it as if I'm, doing the task and putting it through the vent, because I didn't exactly wire my lever to go anywhere. But that doesn't mean I can't pretend that it's fulfilling the exact same task it would have if this were the cafeteria. It's still dumping everything into the main trash bin. And just as promised, we're at the main trash chute that we use to jettison all of the trash outside of the ship, and it's like the O2 task was done. As expected, to replicate this task, you just walk over to storage, open the door because it's not an automatic door, you go over to the switch, you flip it, and you will see momentarily trash will jettison into outer space. Now we're heading into navigation, and the first task that we'll do is chart a course. It's very easy to do. You turn on the tablet, draw a line, and then the task is complete. The way I decided to replicate this task was by making the desk, of course, but then getting a console that has an animation, shrinking it down, tucking it under the desk, and then when interacting with it, it appears as if she is charting the course. Stabilizing steering is one of the easiest tasks to do. You just move the steering reticle over to the center of the screen. And the best way to do this was to simply pretend that you're doing the task, because the steering wheel is just an anchor and there's nothing for you to actually interact with like the last task did. But you can still sit in the chair and sit at the steering wheel for a second or two. Now we're in shields, and one of the two tasks is to have the shields primed. It's a very quick task to do depending on how many colors you get. The way I decided to recreate this task was to take an Institute fan, shrink it down, put it on the back of an Institute wall, shrink the wall down, connect some wiring to the console behind it, and you just sit there and watch the fan rotate. Moving on to admin, the next major task is the card swipe task. This task, I had a couple ideas for how I could recreate it, but I couldn't exactly execute them the way I imagined. What I hoped I could do was find some sort of way to use the charge card and swipe it, but there's no way to do that in the game. So I eventually just gave up. I decided to go with a computer, and since you're doing an admin related task, it made the most sense to have you get on a computer and log in, enter your credentials, or upload a particular holotape. It satisfied the situation. So you need to refuel the upper and lower engines. And the way you do that is you go to the storage area, you get the gas can, you fill it with gas, you go to the upper engine, empty that gas into the engine, go back to storage, fill it up with gas again, go to the lower engine, and fill that with the same gasoline. My way of reenacting this was to have some coolant or turpentine laid out around the ground near the red barrels in the storage room, and then you pick one up, put it in your inventory, take it to the upper engine, you interact with the refrigerator looking thing that gives you an animation as if you are fueling the station, then you go back, pick up another one, then you go back to the lower engine and repeat the process. But my coolant and turpentine just kept glitching through the floor. I don't know if it was my nav mesh or the game I couldn't get the physics to lock in time. So I just had to give up and pretend that I was doing the task yet again, at least half the task. I was able to go over to the refrigerator and it activated an animation that made it look like I was doing something. But the first half was a bust. Realigning the engine output is a very simple task, but recreating said task was not as simple. I decided to just get a console with an animation and plop it down. Simple as that. The start reactor task, otherwise known as Simon Says, is very simple. You just repeat the pattern input on the output side 5 times in order to complete the task. You're probably tired of hearing me say this by now, but there wasn't an actual machine that I could interact with that operated in this sort of way. So I looked for an Institute machine panel that had a similar feel to it. It had an input and output section and had a couple of buttons. And once again, you just sit there and pretend. To unlock the manifolds, you simply press 1 through 10 in the correct order. The numbers are just shuffled around. It's very simple. So I got another Institute panel. I chose one that had numbers on it. The amount of buttons and numbers combined made it a decent substitute for the type of task that I was trying to replicate. I couldn't exactly find one that had 1 through 10 on it, which was a little disappointing, but I did what I could. To calibrate the distributors, you wait until your cursor is in line with the router and you press the button on the other side to lock them into place. And unfortunately, I couldn't find the footage of me standing in front of an Institute panel that looked like the distributor and pretending to activate it. I don't know what happened, but
I am ashamed.
The divert power task is one of those short but repetitive tasks where you pick an area to divert the power to, you flip the switch, you go to that area, and you accept that diverted power. Thankfully, I was able to successfully replicate this task. I got a switch, I flipped it on, which allowed power to the other end of the object I was trying to light up, and I activated that as well. This first sabotage is the reactor sabotage. This actually requires 2 people to fix, and it is a critical sabotage, meaning if it's not fixed, the crewmates lose. So the way it's done is you and a second user will scan your handprint and it will cancel the sabotage. So I found an Institute panel with a stabilize option on it. There's a switch and it's a good stand-in for this task. I'm still waiting for the other user, but it works. The way I replicated the fixes for the O2 sabotage is by placing a panel that's numbered 1 through 9 with a blinking light on the plant base in O2 as well as the wall in admin. Now, for the wall in admin, I thought I might have wanted animation over appearance. I thought I wanted execution over appearance, so I did put a slot machine inside of the wall behind the panel to make it look like your character's interacting with things, because I felt like I was imagining too much. I had to make too many substitutions where I couldn't interact with things. And then also, of course, I decided not to keep it because I wanted the aesthetic more. I don't know. I went back and forth about it, but the option is there. The option's not there for O2, but the option's there for admin. Now we'll be heading into electrical to do the light sabotage. What I like about this and what I don't like about this is that everything is connected as far as wiring. So turning off this switch turns off literally everything. You can actively go in and turn off the lights. You can actively go in and fix the sabotage, and that I like. So I'm going to show you what it looks like with the lights off. And you'll see that with the lights off, you really can't see much of anything on the map. So now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to turn the lights on, and you'll see the difference. I'm not going to have my flashlight on. It'll be akin to having a glow visibility set for crewmates. So you'll get an idea of that. I couldn't do the door sabotage. I'm going to say that right now. I couldn't get the powered doors to play nice with me, with these walls, with the floors, with the wiring. It just wasn't happening this time. Alright, I hope you didn't think these doors were just for show. These little markings on the floor with these vents, they don't just open up to a square and go nowhere. They are all properly connected per the guide with the SKELD map. Everything is properly mapped out. I can go from cafeteria to admin. I can go from med bay to security, from med bay to electrical. I can go from one end of reactor to the other end of reactor. You get the point. I'm going through all of these vents right now to show you that they're properly mapped out. And it was a lot of fun to do. It wasn't too challenging, but if this were an actual mod, if this were actually playable, if the NPCs weren't constantly glitching through floors and walls and having conflicts with pathing and nav mesh, this would be a lot of fun. But it was still fun to create. I think that wraps up the SKELD map tour, the build. I had so much fun doing this. I can't wait to do more builds like this. I've got so many builds planned. I've got a whole Word document, and every day it just keeps growing. And it's not just builds based on other places, but I'm not going to get into all of that just yet. I do have something planned for Halloween, so hopefully I have that out on time. I'm going to get started on it as soon as possible. I do have other character build videos coming out, so stay tuned for those. But anyway, if you're an Among Us fan and you caught the build, I hope that you found that I made this as faithful to the actual map as I possibly could. I hope you enjoyed this recreation. I had a lot of fun building this. If you're a Fallout fan and you're looking for something new to get into, if you're looking for inspiration for things to build, I hope this served as some sort of inspiration to you. I hope you just enjoyed watching the video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe for your hero in disguise, and I'll build something else next time.